What's up, art family? Today we're going to be talking about some things that'll absolutely kill your art. Now, I know that sounds really negative and really awful, and you know what? It gets the clicks, so we're just going to talk about it anyway. I'm going to give you one of the biggest secret sauce tips that you can ever find when it comes to creating almost anything. Now, whenever you are embarking upon the process of creation, be it a drawing or perhaps even a song, for example, you want to start off strong. If what you lay down within the first, I'm going to say minute, and I know this sounds extreme, but just stick with me here. If what you lay down in the first minute doesn't feel good, reset, quick wipe, take a pause, take a brief pause, and just jump right back in. And that's what I want you to pay close attention to as you see me sketch throughout this drawing time-lapse video. Basically, what I'm doing is I'll get a feeling and a flash of what is working immediately. This takes some time to refine. It is not a sense that typically you are really conscientious of when you first begin. You just want to draw. And so most of the things that are going to drive you forward when you're drawing are not going to be based on whether you're feeling it or not. It's going to be based on I should be drawing, or I have this assignment if you're going through like a beginner drawing course, for example. But it doesn't mean that you have to continue just based off of that premises, because that is not a good premises. The premises should be based on the feeling of what it is you're doing. So when you lay down those first few lines, check yourself. Like, see if it has some hopefulness, some elevation, some lift, some inspiration, a little spark, because those are the things that you want to be looking out for. Otherwise, you are going to kill the art. I'm sorry. Every single time, almost without fail, 99.9% of the time, when I push forward on a drawing that starts bad, it ends bad. Or at the very best, it ends mediocre. And nobody wants to end up mediocre. But the thing is you have to be aware of your start, a strong start. Now, obviously, you need to learn your foundations, your fundamentals, all that good jazz, because it's really important to be able to do anything. Like if I just hit random notes on the guitar without any knowledge of theory, any knowledge of chord shapes, anything like that, chances are it's going to sound terrible. It is discordant, it's disharmonious, it doesn't conjure within you a feeling of cohesion, a feeling of whatever you're trying to convey, So when you have structure, when you have basis, it feels good. It feels like it makes sense. It makes sense to your ears, makes sense to other people's ears. You're not going into that avant-garde territory where you're throwing out the rules, because the rules are kind of there for a reason. And yes, they are meant to be broken, but that's after you learn them so well that you can recite them in your sleep, right? After you understand anatomy on levels that give you just absolute comfort in drawing, whatever animals you want to draw. If you're into drawing animal anatomy or humans and human bodily parts and movements and how the kinetics transfer and how to make things convey like there's weight to them. All those things are things that you have to learn and learn the rules of before you shatter that stuff. Otherwise, again, it's going to kill your art. So what I mean by saying that it's going to kill your art is that you're going to end up in a place wherein things just feel off for some reason and there's no like really good emotional impact. If you start with just that spark in the beginning, the one I'm talking about, where it's like you get a good feeling right when you get going, then you will have that to carry you through. And yes, you can sort of destroy it and dismantle it over time by working on stuff you don't know, or working, in ignorance without reference or without principles. But the strong start will still be underlying all of that, just because you threw a bunch of, what's like a really nasty thing to put on a sandwich, or like, I don't know. So peanut butter and jelly mixes, right? Like people agree with that, at least if you're an American. And let's say that you put peanut butter and olives. Peanut butter and olives don't mix, but the bread and the peanut butter, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're having a peanut butter bread and olive sandwich, unless you have very strange tastes, it's going to be awful. The notes of the flavor are going to clash in your mouth. You may gag. You may go the extra mile and actually regurgitate. And I know that's super nasty, but it's just kind of to drive the point home that if you are actually not paying attention to the pieces that are working and sticking with those, then you're going to start getting experimental. You're going to start adding on stuff that may not work. And there's a time for that. There's a place for that. But again, it has the risk of killing the art. Yes, you can get better and better potentially, but you have to be willing to go backwards in the process to what was working before you start experimenting. For example, like I like to use gradient maps in my paintings, and a lot of the time the gradient map is ridiculous. It blows out the values, it looks awful, and just creates really interesting effects, but they also kind of kill the art. So my goal then is to taper and mess with the settings of the gradient map and the layer blend modes until I get something that feels palatable, until something is going to work, has harmony. And once you get that harmony going with your work, then you realize you can harmonize more and more on top of that. And then when you choose to add something discordant, it's for a reason. You know, if I play like a chord progression, it can be happy and sad at the same time, but it's mixed intentionally. So that has pieces that are like, yeah, a little bit up, oh, a little bit down, oh, a little bit interesting, but it has sort of a cohesion to it because I know what I'm doing, at least at a very basic level musically, and I apply the things in a very advanced level in art. So you start with these foundational elements, you start with a spark, and you can carry yourself pretty far to something very solid. And you can wrap up very solid things, very solid pieces within your comfort zone. However, once you start deviating outside of your comfort zone, once you start experimenting, once you work from a couple lines or a couple ideas that don't feel good to you, you're going to kill the art. And that's what I want to avoid at all costs for you. So essentially, this is just how you can avoid killing the art most of the time. There's going to be times where the art dies, and I'm sorry, it's just reality. Whatever, magic you think that it kind of could imbue the process with, where you're going to be able to resurrect a failing piece on it's like trying to get a sinking ship out of the ocean as it's taking on water. It is not fun. It does not bode well. And maybe if you do it professionally, you have to do that sometimes for whatever reason. But in most cases, I think it can be avoided. And I want you to be able to avoid that very common pitfall because it really can hurt your art spirit as you're moving forward. It can cause you to have much less of a verve for what it is you're doing, like trying to improve your drawing abilities, trying to express yourself and your ideas. So I'm gonna take a sip of tea real quick. Delicious. Yeah. So in essence, as you are moving forward in your artistic journey, pay attention to the spark, the initial spark that allows you to get something going, to build a flame that's going to ignite your inspiration as you're creating a piece. However, that is just part of the equation. And I talk more about this in my more advanced courses and materials, like the Art Maxian Pack on the beginnerdrawingcourse.com. But the basis of what I'd like to say about it is the spark, the initial spark has to be there for like feeling the idea, but then you really have to flesh that idea out. And that doesn't always involve just doing a whole bunch of art until like you start getting to the points where you don't know what you're doing anymore with the idea because it was vague in the first place. For example, I have a bunch of sparks in this demo that you're seeing. There was like the Nico Samurai, where it's like, okay, I want a girl with cat ears and like samurai armor and to be looking kind of cool. And it's like, that's as far as I took it, sort of like, okay, well, what kind of armor? Now I need to go find armor reference. If I start to just do that armor from my head, it's going to look weaker than it could than if I really understand different types of samurai armor, at least visually. So you have to stop at a certain point anyway in your process, even if you get a spark, to be able to flesh out the stuff that needs more realism, more information. For example, there was a song I was working on yesterday, and I had this not chord progression, but like this progression of notes. It has sort of an interesting meandering to it that isn't perfectly consonant, it isn't perfectly harmonious, and I don't have in my musical development yet the theory and the knowledge to know what chords go on that. So when I try to add any single chord to that little little melody there, it always sounds terrible. It always sounds really dissonant because I don't know, I don't have the chord vocabulary, just like you might not have the visual library to know how to get to the next part. But the thing is whenever you're creating anything, you can solve the problem. You know, it just means dedication. It just means letting the problem into you, knowing what you need to do. For example, last night I started studying the fretboard because I'm like, okay, I really don't understand all the notes here. What do I need to do in order to get a better handle on that? How do I need to understand the relationship of the notes? Because I can't build off that. I'm stuck. I can't go any further because it's going to sound bad. I'm going to kill the art. So much like your drawings, you have to understand where your skill ends and how much you can really realistically push without actually destroying what you're working on. Because I can tell you from experience, it's devastating. It hurts a lot when you had something, especially that you loved in the beginning, that starts to come apart before your very eyes, the sinking ship of your piece, and you are just slapping more brushstrokes or slapping more marks on it or erasing and redrawing and nothing is working. But it's like a mindless effort. You know, you're not actually being conscientious of what needs to happen or needs to be fixed. And sometimes that means starting all the way over and treating the other pieces as study, which a lot of people don't want to hear. I wouldn't want to hear it, especially after putting like 5 hours into it or something. But that's just the case sometimes, sadly. And you have to be able to roll with the punches if you're going to have enough resilience to do this art thing, whether it is in your own work or work for clients, if that is your goal, or just whatever endeavor you want to take on in terms of your creative expression. You have to be ready for those moments. You have to know how to not kill the art. You have to give the art everything it needs to thrive and live and become whole and orbed and ready to be presented to whatever group of people you'd like to present it to. I think that is about it for today. I really appreciate you tuning into the channel. Feel free to like, subscribe, all that good stuff as we move forward into making more videos, into releasing BDC Second Edition, the beginner drawing course, you know, second edition, 7-ish years after the first one was created. So really grateful for all that. Thank you for all the support, and I will see you in the next video. Take care and happy drawing.